3, 2, 1.
Hello! And welcome to
I'm That Witch! With Maddy and Bridgette.
Woohoo! We're back. We took
The boys are back.
The boys are back. The boys are back in town.
With our sodas in hand.
Yeah,
our caffeine in hand.
Cracking open a cold one, aka a cold poppy ginger lime.
Gotta crack open a cold one this 4th of July weekend. The patriotism in us is just flowing through our veins. Red, white, and blue, baby.
We had a nice hiatus. I believe this is our first episode back after our big outing at Vero Beach.
It will be, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we had such a great time in Vero Beach. It was such a great trip. Terrifying drive through the wilderness. And then we made it out on the other side, and everyone was so nice.
Yes, everyone was amazing. We met some awesome people. This is obviously our first year in podcasting, and like for Love Witch Spells, like it's rounding out our first year in business. And for any of you small-time business owners out there, you know that is not the easiest year. So everyone, who was in attendance and other vendors and everything were so supportive, so amazing. We are still in the process of like pumping out videos of interviews we did with people there about their spooky stories or their paranormal stories. We already have some out, but I think we really met some amazing people. And, if I may shout out to our raffle winner, Monica Ladd.
Yay!
Who we met her daughter first, and she was
yes.
I have to go get my mom to tell you a story. and she did. She came back.
She did have a great story in the end, too.
So,
which you can listen to on our TikTok.
Yes, that one I have not posted yet, but it is on the way. And, and she's a professional storyteller, too. So, if I recall correctly. So
yeah, I think that was her official profession. I don't know where she works out of, if it's her own business or something like that, but I think she's down in South Florida, from what I remember.
I believe so, like Port St. Lucie area. So she won our raffle, and that prize is currently on its way to her. But shout out to Monica and to all the amazing people that we had sit with us for an interview.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to jump in to a new story.
I'm so excited. Who are we hearing about today?
We are going to be speaking about Theoris of Lemnos. Have you ever heard of Theoris?
I have never heard of Theoris. I'm
Perfect.
So excited. I'm so excited that you have one I don't know.
I was so interested in this one. Theoris is a supposed witch/folk healer from ancient Greece. Maybe one of the first witches who were ever executed. So, like most of our stories, not a lot of documents to support this, but a lot of what my research came from for today was Derek Collins' paper, The Trial of Theoris of Lemnos, a 4th century witch or folk healer. Some other sites as well that we'll put in our bio of the episode. But we are going to be talking about Theoris. This takes place in 4th century BC of ancient Greece. And while belief in witchcraft and magic was common in Greece during the 4th century BC, actual trials for witchcraft were extremely rare. And today we're going to be looking at the case of Theoris, one of maybe the oldest accounts of a witchcraft trial that we actually have some documentation of it happening. So, let's set the scene, shall we?
I'm ready.
Witchcraft seemed to be abound across many of the islands of Greece, including the mainland. And although there's criticism of magic that was written by Plato and other Greek scholars from this same time period, Greece had a long-standing tradition of the open practice of magic and the sale of magical aids. Greek mythology itself heavily features tales of magical potions, curses, and spiritual trickery, including figures such as Hecate, the goddess of the moon and witchcraft, and Circe, the sorceress daughter of Helios, who is an expert in magical herbs and potions.
Yeah.
So, Greece believed in the power of many different aids, including amulets. For example, farmers often wore amulets around their wrists or their neck, as it was believed wearing them might guarantee sufficient rainfall for the season. They also utilized spells and potions, and there's even surviving Greek I'm going to say this wrong, papyrus, the plural of papyrus, papyri, which details the instructions on how to get over physical ailments, improve one's sex life, and eliminate vermin from the home. So, I mean, they were pretty well known, as well as for a unique form of cursing known as a binding spell, which typically involved carving a curse on small pieces of lead, which were folded up and pierced with a bronze or iron nail to be later buried with a corpse or near cemeteries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you mind if I do a quick interjection that binding spells are still definitely a thing and something that I will fully say that I have done several times, although they're typically in modern times seen less as like a curse or a hex and more of like a protection spell.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry to like go off on a tangent and interrupt you, but that's so interesting that like I guess realistically, like yes, they could be seen as like hexing someone or like magic against someone, but typically what we see them as now, like in modern times, is when someone is doing you harm or meaning you harm, you would perform like maybe a binding spell on them, which can look like something like taking a picture of them or writing their name on a piece of paper and folding it up, and you like would wrap it in string or cord and bury it just like that.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
I've got a few people I could write a binding spell about right now.
I will help.
But that's besides the point.
I will help you. I'll do it for you.
So, based on what we know about that time period, that 4th century BC, there's a lot of different magic that's going on around Greece. There's even a part of mainland Greece, Thessaly, where the women maintained a strong reputation for witchcraft, with one scholar suggesting it was the leading center for the cult of Hecate, the aforementioned goddess of witchcraft.
I'm in. I'm sold.
She's already sold. She's headed over to Thessaly right now.
Say no more. Listen, it's not my first cult I've been a part of, okay?
Yes. These women were often referred to as pharmaketes. And again, apologies for the pronunciation. Or the singular pharmacus, meaning usually someone who gave out drugs or medicines. There is no real word that specifically translates to witchcraft, but women who typically had these kind of practices were referred to as pharmaketes.
Okay, so like pharmacy, like a pharmacist. They were like
the
healers.
Latin pharmacy. Yes, exactly. Huh. So in Athens, using or selling magic was not in itself criminal, but using potions or drugs to kill another was.
Makes sense. Okay, that tracks.
That's where we get to the story of Theoris. So who is Theoris? Theoris was a Greek woman who hailed from Lemnos, a Greek island very small that lies northeast of Athens in the Aegean Sea. She lived in Athens in the 4th century BC, reportedly working as a pharmacus. In another account, Lemnos is referred to as a mantis or seer, quote, seer. But these descriptions aren't really mutually exclusive, as typically magic users in ancient Greece did not seem to necessarily restrict themselves to one type of supernatural activity or profession in that sense. They usually typically had various skills that they could afford themselves to clients. Lemnos had actually been, so the Lemnos is the island from which she hailed from. It had been controlled by Athens since around 390 BC. And it's theorized that, that Theoris somehow made her way to Athens, and that's how she ended up being in that point in time in the mainland. Okay. Working in Athens. Again, with her children as well. We don't know exactly much about her family, her upbringing, or anything like that. We just know that she comes from this island. She's in mainland Greece, working in the city of Athens as a pharmacus. Pharmacus? Someone please correct me who's Greek. So all we do know is that sometime before 323 BC, Theoris was put on trial in Athens, convicted, and then executed along with her children.
Oh my god, were they minors or were they adult children?
Unclear. There's no actual documents from the trial that have survived the test of time, and we only can go off of the account that was given in another trial that occurred in the same time period.
Oh my god.
So that's where we get any record of who Theoris was in the first place. The earliest and most detailed source we have is from Demosthenes in his speech, quote, against Aristogiton, which was addressed to jurors in the trial of Aristogiton, an Athenian orator. Theoris is only mentioned because of her connection to Euonymus, the brother of Aristogiton, who was testifying during the trial. Demosthenes, in his speech, argues that Euonymus's testimony in this trial should be ignored, in part due to his shady past and involvement with Theoris. He states, quote, "It was this man who took the potions and incantations from the maidservant of Theoris of Lemnos, the filthy sorceress whom you executed for these things, both her and all of her family. The maidservant informed against her mistress, and this evildoer, again possibly referring to Euonymus or Aristogiton, has had children by her." So it seems to be the implication is that she had sold incantations or some kind of potions and had children by, again, either Euonymus or Aristogiton. We don't really get much clarification as to whom, but we assume it's Euonymus.
Okay.
In this testimony. It's unclear even what she's exactly charged with in the surviving accounts. And there's really 3 accounts, 2 in addition to Demosthenes, that detail who was Theoris, what happened, what was her trial about. Demosthenes, who made that original testimony, that original speech, states she was charged with casting incantations and using harmful drugs, while another reports she was charged with impiety. And while a third account states she was convicted of committing many misdeeds and teaching the slaves to deceive. So we've got like a very broad range of what people believed occurred at this time.
She has the range.
Demosthenes seems to be the closest to in being accurate of what exactly occurred. But however, the researcher that I mentioned at the beginning of the story, who supplied a lot of the context of what he believes happened, this is David Collins, posits that Theoris was likely charged with the crime of intentional homicide by poisoning. And as her family was executed with her, she was likely tried before the Areopagus, where the Athenian judicial court tried cases of deliberate homicide and wounding. If she had been charged for unintentional wounding or homicide, she would have been tried in front of a separate judicial body in front of a different rock, essentially. Because the Areopagus, let me just give you a visual, and I hope we can include this somewhere, is that of a massive boulder. It is where they would try cases before a judicial body of people from Athens. It's a rock. I just imagine them all hanging out on the rock, and they're like, "Yeah, I think you did it."
I see. Now my brain immediately went to, you and I both have experience having to go into courtrooms because of our typical day jobs.
True.
And so I'm imagining all the times that I've had to like walk in and go through security and be like, I'm looking for courtroom, 35 or whatever. I'm just imagining someone like walking up to this boulder and being like, I'm here for this person's trial, and oh no, sorry, you have the wrong boulder.
You have the wrong boulder.
You have to go down the hallway, take the elevator up to like the second story, and then go over to that boulder.
Literally. I mean, a massive boulder. And that's where these trials for, again, intentional homicide. There were 2 separate courts for intentional versus unintentional homicide and wounding. Which I think is interesting.
She's charged with first degree, not manslaughter, is what I'm
Exactly. Exactly. So that's all we know about Theoris. It's so limited, but I think it's interesting to kind of see this account of a specific witch in history, especially in a time where really witchcraft and magic, potions, anything of that nature was widely accepted in society. Actually, like people like Plato in their time period were very much the outliers in critiquing this practice, because witchcraft was used from the poorest to the richest in society, in Greek society at this time. So I think it's very different from previous episodes where it was generally something that was taboo or unaccepted in general mainstream society. So very interesting to see kind of where they differ, where Theoris's culture is so much different, and considering it's, I think, actually taking place before any of the other stories we've talked about in the past, any of the other witches we've spoken about in the past.
That is very interesting, and I'm going to say something that might be controversial, so feel free to tell me to cut this out. But interesting that it was so widely accepted at this time and in this location and culture. And so realistically, she was not killed for, being a witch, but rather for taking someone's life purposefully. Um, and it seems like all of the stories we talk about where people are tried and executed for witchcraft and crimes against God are almost all centered around religion and, let's be honest, Christianity.
Yes.
I know that Christianity is not the only religion that persecutes witchcraft in some capacity, but of the people that we've talked about, like the time periods and the culture, it is interesting that for this particular story, it's like, oh yeah, no, like this is just normal. We actually are just mad that you killed someone.
Yes, that seems to be the general sentiment. It was not about the witchcraft itself, it was about the purpose for which it was used.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there's debate about whether, she did so intentionally or unintentionally, because she was, again, detailed as a pharmacist who produced these, in general, as a healer. So David Collins believes she was charged with intentional homicide, in terms of she was providing these potions for the intended death of another. And that's what they took issue with, was the intention, was the intention and purpose of wanting to harm someone instead of benefiting someone else.
That is so fascinating. That is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So a little bit shorter of an episode today, but I thought it was very interesting. It seems like, based on my research, that she is the earliest account of earliest, like, actually surviving account of a witchcraft trial. It seems like in history, fourth century BC. I think that's the earliest that we've at least spoken about, and I think it was what I saw from the, like, timelines that I've kind of mapped out.
Yeah, I think so. And I thank you so much again for bringing this to us too. But also, I think that this case in particular can have such an interesting implication for, like, witches today, because I know that that's something that we have talked about, when starting this podcast, is like, I'm a witch, you're a history buff. We combine the two. We see, were they or weren't they of these alleged witches. We see what the implication is. And it's interesting because I think that the implication of, it's not the witchcraft that's the problem, it's the intent for which it's used, is so poignant, especially like in modern times where we do have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, at least for the time being.
Yeah. Let's check back in 10 years.
Yeah. Or, I mean, let's check back in January, honestly.
True.
Ooh, yikes. Anyway, no one's accused me of being apolitical, but it is interesting to see, like, that there would be this freedom of, like, being able to freely practice your healing or your religion or your, craft, and it's just a matter of, like, but don't do it with the intention of hurting other people. And I know that a lot of modern witches, like, that debate comes up a lot in, like, modern witchcraft a lot. There are those that are in the camp of only love and light, only positivity, with harm to none, sort of mentality, and others who are like, well, of course I'm going to practice what a lot of people call, like, the left-handed path, where they do a little more darker things. And then others who are, like, right in the middle of, like, I need to do shadow work in order to understand, like, the light part of things, and I'm not going to harm someone intentionally unless they harm me, and then they kind of brought it on themselves. So that's just, I don't know if I really have a point to that, except that I think that this story in particular carries a lot of really interesting implications as to how we practice witchcraft today.
So that's all we have for today. on this episode is a little bit of a shorter one, but I'm really happy we got to be together again after our trip to Vero. Next week, actually, I'm not sure what is set for next week, so that will be a mystery for you all to see our episode. But please check out our TikTok. Please check out Birdie's little store online. Many of you who came out to Vero, we gave cards out. You can shop online. She ships to the continental United States.
I do,
and takes commissions.
And I do take
for individual
commissions.
Spell work, as you explained to a lot of people at the Grimoire exhibition.
Yep. So if you visit us at lovewitchspells.com, like we also have a page dedicated to the podcast there, like a little page on there. But then also we have the store, and I have a blog on there. And yes, absolutely. If you have if you see something on there but you want it made a little bit differently, or if you have a specific issue that you're facing that you are looking for a solution for, the whole goal of putting together Love Witch Spells and Supplies was to be able to tailor things to individual specific needs. And so definitely reach out. You can contact us by email. And thank you guys so much for listening.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say hit him up in the DMs. Yeah. Don't hit her up in the DMs like that.
Slide into my DMs professionally.
Respectfully.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
I'm That Witch is researched, written, and hosted by Maddy Guerra and Bridgette Golden. Edited by Bridgette Golden. You can find more episodes on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also find us on social media on Instagram at LoveWitchSpells or TikTok at LoveWitchSpells13. Make sure to like and subscribe if you liked what you heard today and want to hear more. Thanks for listening.
We totally went off the rails.